Baruch Flashman here at the Tikkun Elevator. Call a little makeup share as couldn't get my computer working exactly right to record, so we're going to start it again. And we're getting close to where we're going to start analyzing on the next page the Havlaw of the Revuah inside of Zeranpin. And then we're going to get into the detail on that and go through each one of the individual days and see what we can come up with. Learning the language of the Rashash. So these shiurim are not intended for everybody, and you have to be along the way a little bit in terms of Kabbalah. So today says like this. We're going to go into the TIV of Rashash, and he's going to come with a little introduction. So it says like this. Hagdamas the Seder his pashtas of Chasadim. So this is an intro to the spread of the Chasadim and the Gevuras, the Bracha. So we are in the middle of the bracha. We got to the place where we say the name of the Shem. So this is where we're going, and he's going to start teaching us some of the language of the Rashash. So here we are. We're beginning once again Dhamma the Seder is Pashta Chasadim V'Gevuros, the order of the spread of the Chasadim V'Gevuros of the bracha. So we're in the middle of the bracha, as I said. So Nizboyer La'el, the parts of Zer Anpin Kolol Mevok the Shem Ma Vok the Shem Ben. There's a male side and a female side to it. For the Kahu Nechlach L'Shnei Bechino, so therefore it's divided into two different parts. Hanikrom Yachdav, which are called together by the name Zun Hagadolim. So that's Zun Hagadolim. Chelek Hamal Shalom Nikra Zav. Now, on the other hand, Zeranpin is called the right side of this is called the Zon. Chelek HaBen Shalom Nikra Nuk. V'shnechem Yachad Mahavim as parts of Zeranpin HaKlali. So Zeranpin, the general Zeranpin, the Zeranpin that we know and love. He said, so the Chasadim and Gevur are going to spread into a portion of the Zah, the Zun, the Hagadolim. The Zun Hagadolim. Whether I think I read it slightly wrong. They go to both sides, the female side and the male side. The Zun Hagadolim. The Zun Hagadolim. So they're also v'heim b'chelik. Wow. Hey b'chelik hanuk dezon agedolim. Harasadim is pashtem b'tzad yamim shalahem hanik ramah. V'hagavuras mispashtem b'tzad small shalahem hanik ramben. So he said v'hine harasadim hey b'bechinas ma. Ben. So this understand that the languages that the Chasadim refer to Ma and the Bechinas Ben, and the Gevuras of Ben. Gam Kav Yamim Hu Bechinas Ma. So also just take the right line. He says the right line is Ma, Kav small Bechinas Ben, and the left line is going to be called Ben. So if we have a right and we have a left, it's going to be Ma or Ben. V'raka Emsa Shekolu Shnei Tzdadim, only the middle part, which has two different sides to it. Huba Bechinas Ma u Ben is the Bechina of both Ma and Ben. Hilkach, therefore, Bein Chasadim and Bein Gevuros, whether we're talking about the Chasadim and we're talking about the Gevuros, Yesh to call Echad Bechem Shlosha Chalukos, that each one of them has three different differentiations, or different parts. Both in Zeh. HaChasadim, Hamispashtim b'sfiras the kav yamin, which go down to the right line, which is called the right line is called chacham. Chacham is chesed, is chachma, chesed, and netzach. Nekroim ma, that's always called ma. Now he has these brackets, so it should be ma, the dark print, ma de ma. That's called ma de ma. So he says achelak hamispashtim b'kav yamin nekra ma. So you have a ma de ma. But Bechina Chasadim Shehem Bechinas Ma, and it's Chasadim aspect of Ma, and it's called the Ma is okay, it's Ma. Chasadim is Pasha B'Sphere is the Kav small, but they're also spread into the line to the left line too, which is a line of Baga. They're calling the Ben the Ma. His Pashtas the Kav small. That's spreading down the left line of the Chasadim. The chasadim and bispasha b'sfiras the kavim soy the dante nekroim ma u ben. They're called also. This is called by the ma u ben the ben. So ma u ben. He says his pashtos the kavim soy the ma, which is the chasadim. The hagavuras mispasha b'sfiras the kav small, or that is of chachan nekroim ma the ben. So his pashtos the kav yamen and nekroim ma the ben. Bechinas and Gevuras Shehe, but Bechinas Ben, so the Gevuras which are just plain Ben, he says, HaGevuras Mispashtos Bespheres, the Kav small, they spread into the sphere of the left line. They cry Ben, and that left line is called the Ben, and the other black print is Ben the Ben. Left to left is Ben the Ben. So he says, his Pashtos, the Kav small, which is Ben, which is the Gevuras. The Gevuras mispashtim b'spheres the kavim soy. They also spread into the middle line. This is the Gevuras we're talking about. Nikra, and that middle line is called dati, das, teferis, and yisod. Nekroim ben dema. That is called the ben dema, the ben. So let's see what again. He says the ben dema. He says that's. This pashtas into the middle line is called the ben umad the ben, which are the gevuros. The gevarin is bar barichos b'mavos. So we already saw this in the introduction. He said b'seidech is pashtas a chasana the gevuros the shitas of Rashash according to the Rashash. So what is he saying? Al pi bir marav Avraham Mishan, he said b'balchas fas emes hal benachzor al zecha b'getzara, and let's go over this language which is written by Rabbi Mishan. He says a chasadim v'chavuros mispashtem b'shefes spheres atachtonis. So the chasadim and the gevuros they spread into the lower spheres. Because sphere la'atzbahi with parts of shalom, every sphere by itself is a complete parts of Kol b'shlosha prakim, which has within it 3 prakim. Prakim al yonim they call sphere nekroim chabat. Prakim emseim nekroim chagat. Prakim atachtonim nekroim nai. So this is part of the language of the Rashash, and let's see how much more we can do. Hachachanim v'chagavuras mispashtim rak bepirkim emseim v'tachtonim shel spheres chagat nahim. So they only go into the middle partsufim, that is Hagat and Nai. So he says mispashtim rak bepirkim and se'im v'tachtanim shel spheres Hagat nehem. To say that his pashtus chasadim kan is like this: the kol chesed the gevura mispashetes b'sfira achas b'shevach spheres, so called Hagat nehem dezer anpin. So let's see how this goes. He says below derek below of al derek and in this way, hagavuros mispashtos call achas b'sfira achas b'shevach spheres chagat nehem denuk. They spread into one sphere. Hagavuros mispashtos call achas b'sfiras achas b'shevach spheres chagat nehem denuk. So they go both sides in the chagat nehem. That's 7 different places. But now Shasfiras Shabasider, this is what we want you to know. He says in the Siddur, Nekroim Kan Hasfiras B'Shem B'Sacherim, they're really called by other names. The Sfiras HaChesed Nekroim Hachan the Hagat. So when we talk about Chesed, it's called the Hachan the Hagat. For Hatam, what's the reason why it would be called that? The Fisha She'im nechshav as spheres Hagat, the parts of La'atzmo. So let's say that those 3 spheros are considered to be one part of. Nimsa shespheres chasadim he kav yamim hachan is going to be on the right line. Chasadim are always going to be on the right. Shechosera the parts of the spheres agavura nikroim bava the Hagat. The fisha spheres of Gavuros, he tzad small shell parts of a Hagat is the left line of the parts of a Hagat. Bechinas baga, val devik zechat nikros spheres of teferes dati the Hagat. So he says spheres hanetzach is called the Hachan, the right line of Nai. That's Netzach is going to be called Hachan the Nai. Sfiras Hahod is going to be called Bagananai. Sfiras Yesod is called Date Denai. So he says, and I think this is where we're going to stop because I think that's where the original shir stopped. It was short because I overslept today. This is Baruch Fleischman, your old Saba here at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel. We're trying to get into this, and we're going to get more, as we said before, into the actual look of the Rashash.